Good afternoon, guys. Thank you for joining me, guys. Before we talk about this video and we go into the main meat of it, I guess, I want to talk about something that happened to me last night. I was in B&M, which, if you live in the UK, you know what B&M is. If you don't live in the UK, it's kind of like a discount store that sells everything from food to garden furniture, homeware, you know the sort of place. Anyway, I was in B&M. I go there because it shuts, I think, about 10:30 or something, and I go late at night. I heard it came over the tannoy, over the announcement. It said security to aisle 1. So anyway, I was just like, what's happening here? So anyway, I got to the till and I was speaking to the lady, and I said, what's happened? And she said, oh well, there's 2 gentlemen, and they're known to the staff, and they come in and they steal food, tins of food. So I went away and I was like, oh, okay. And I was thinking, okay, so we shouldn't steal things. And then I was thinking, but they're stealing food. And then I was thinking about something I spoke about on here, and I said that the UK police won't investigate a theft from a shop if it's under £200. So I was thinking, well, why is this happening? Is it happening because these people are living I've got Ferraris and Lamborghinis outside, or are these people genuinely hungry and want to feed themselves? And the fact that the police are not prosecuting for crimes under £200, I'm kind of thinking, it's giving me so many thoughts. I'm thinking, well, are they wanting this to happen? Are they that vastly undermanned that they can't go out to deal with this because it costs them more than they'll try and retrieve? And is this a sign of things to come in the future? Because the more people steal things, the more the shops will have to put the prices up to stop people, to recuperate that price. The more people put the prices up, the more people will steal. So we're literally in a self-fulfilling death spiral of theft and prices going up. So where do we stand on this, guys? What's the solution? Because I really can't find a solution to that, and I'm really thinking about it. Where do we go with this? And as we move forwards and things get worse, I really do think this is just going to become more and more of a thing. And we may get to a case where you either buy your food from the supermarket and pay taxes, or you buy it from the black market. And I don't know, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Excuse me. So the energy grid in Ukraine, guys, at the moment, especially Kiev, it's had a really big, it's really struggling. So the reason I'm going to talk about this in Kiev is because, for those of you who've been watching this channel, I've been saying for such a long time that our energy grid in the UK and our water supply is really vulnerable. And as we move forward and these, and attacks start to happen and we get dragged into these conflicts, remember what we said about the Andrew Bridgen interview. If you've not watched it, go and see it now. He said, and I kind of agree with him, that the war will be called July, August, maybe a little bit later. Guys, that's what he said, not me, but I'm agreeing with him. So if we take that as as a timeline, then these acts of criminal gangs that will be acting as saboteurs, they will target the water supply. They'll target our our energy grid, our utilities. Let me just read something here, guys, from Reuters. Obviously, I'll put the links in the description. I'll put the links in the description. So Kiev, 12th of June, when the power goes down and the elevator stops working, Ukrainian couple Marina and Valerie leave the pushchair on the ground floor and carry their 2-month-old son up 12 flights of stairs to their apartment. See, I didn't even think of this. People living in, inner cities that will be affected. Do you have a lift that goes up to your flat or apartment? These lifts won't be working, if the electricity goes down. And once the authorities in Kiev have notified residents of an up-and-coming scheduled electricity outage, they rush to bath little Marion, which is, I'm assuming their child, and prepare food for the family before the lights go out and the taps run dry. Can you imagine living like that, guys? Because this is, these are the things that we have to contend and we have to think about as we're thinking about, what's going to happen to the UK in the future. I've said, many, many times, I don't think the UK is going to take rocket attacks and, you know, these long range weapons and cities being destroyed, although it may happen. I don't see a framework for that happening now. I've said I think the Falklands is the place that's under the most risk, but these are the things that you've got to live with. These day-to-day things, what people in Ukraine are dealing with now, that's what I feel like we're going to have to deal with in the UK, because guys, I can't say it enough. The energy system and the utilities in the UK is ridiculously vulnerable. So when we think about, you know, these wars, we always want to think about the nuclear weapons going off and tanks and Russians coming into our... That's not what it's going to be like. If we're in the UK, it's going to be a lot of, you know, just stuff like this. It's going to be death by a thousand cuts. But anyway, guys, so that's what's... I just wanted to bring that to your attention because it's a really good article, and I'll put it in the description. And if you've got time, go read the article and then picture yourself in that situation, whether you live in a city, in the countryside. Think about your situation if the water and the electricity and the gas goes off. But anyway, guys, so moving further afield, further east now. Remember back when you know, there was all the attacks north of Kharkiv, and there was all the, you know, there's all the people on the news saying, oh yes, Russia's opening a new front, and I was like, no, they're trying to encircle Kharkiv. And, you know, then things move forward, and they're like, oh yes, and nobody really knew what was happening on the TV. Well, remember, the Russians have started attacking now south of Kharkiv, which would make sense if you're going to do a pincer movement around Kharkiv. So there have been 60 attacks around the region of, I'm going to try and say this, guys, Pokrovsk. Guys, if you're Ukrainian and I'm destroying that word, I am sorry. I'll put the links to this in the bio as well, guys, okay? So that was as of 3 o'clock today. So if you look at that on the map, it's below Kharkiv. So that would mean they're trying to come from the north and the south. Now this kind of, for me, it's the reason that that NATO and that the Western forces said that the Ukrainians can now use Western weapons to strike targets inside Russia. Because don't forget, you know, NATO troops, namely the French, have already committed to going into Ukraine if there's significant movement, if there's significant gains by the Russians in the east of the country. Excuse me. Now, this announcement to let the Ukrainians use NATO weapons inside Russia doesn't really matter, and it's kind of a 4D chess move, because if you remember David Cameron, he went out there and he said he's already greenlit them, and he's already said, yeah, you can use these weapons wherever you want. So it's kind of smoke and mirrors now that the focus is on other NATO countries that are allowing this to happen, when, you know, Britain has all of the weapons, you know, if not more, and it's really easy for these just to be channeled through Britain. So for example, if America wants to give Ukrainian a certain type of weapon, but they don't want to be seen to do it, they can then sell that weapon to the UK. The UK can then gift it to Ukraine. So it's, you know, it's kind of doesn't really make any difference. It's just smoke and mirrors. And remember, it's this like, you know, it's this, what do we call it? The tactical tiptoe. When one country says something and then everybody else catches up, so they do it, and then somebody else does something, and we're just pushing these red lines forwards and forwards all the time. So also in Ukraine, the ATACMS systems, they've been attacking ATACMS, sorry guys. So ATACMS would be Army Tactical Missile System. It's exactly that, an Army Tactical Missile System. But the Ukrainians have really been focusing now on taking out the Russian air defences, so the the S-300s and the S-400 air defence systems, which is what you would see before an air campaign comes. So I feel that at the moment, you know, the Ukrainians are taking out Russian air defences, Russian detection facilities, like their radars, you know, all in the what's the word I'm looking for, in the preliminary stages of getting the F-16s, because when they get the F-16s, guys, I feel the Ukrainians are going to do a huge air campaign, and you know, it's going to be really interesting to see where this goes and how the Russians react. Remember what came out recently, and I know I've said this before, but I just want to bring it to you guys again, because it's funny, I was watching mainstream media and they're kind of reporting on stuff we were talking about weeks ago, that the Ukrainians have now said, I think yesterday, that a lot of the Ukrainian F-16s will not be kept in Ukraine. They'll be kept in, well, somewhere else, somewhere safe, because they don't want the Russians to attack them. Which is, you know, it's kind of nice that you've got that facility. But the reality is, I don't ever think these F-16s are going to be flown from Ukraine. I think they're going to be flown from either Poland or one of the Baltic states. Also, the US has, interestingly, lifted a ban on the Azov battalions using the US weapons. So for those of you who don't know, the Azov battalion is, how do we say? Well, they're labelled as this like right-wing, ultra-nationalist, you know, group. Now, those of you who live in the UK, remember what the media call, guys, and I'm not, you know, I'm just stating facts here. You know, look how the media portrays some marchers as right-wing. You know, the media will come out and they'll say, right-wing extremists march London, and you'll see like a nanan and a granddad and, you know, some dad with a kid on the shoulders with a Union Jack. It's insane. So when I see these things like right-wing and far right, they may be that, and I don't know. But I always start to question, all right, who's deciding that they're right-wing and who's deciding that they're ultra-right-wing? But anyway, that's the news, guys, okay? The US has lifted a ban on the Azov Brigade using US weapons. So, you know, I'm starting to think, why are they doing that? Well, does this battalion have some sort of special capability? Have they got some sort of prior knowledge of the ground? Why are they doing it now? Well, I'm thinking they're doing this now maybe because they want to empower them for when the air campaign goes in. They want them armed and they want them maybe to be able to push forwards, you know, where other people won't be able to. Now, will it change anything? I don't really think so, and I don't think how. So what you've got to think about is who's policing this. So Joe Biden, he's in America. He says, "Hey guys, those Azov battalions, they're not having any of our US weapons." Nice one, Joe. Who's going out there and checking? You know, is there some sort of US, I don't know, policeman or somebody from Congress going, "Hey son, that's an American weapon, hand it over"? I don't know how this thing's being policed. It may be that it's just got to a stage in Ukraine where the Azov battalion are just getting these weapons anyway. So, you know, the Americans might just think, hey, well, do you know what? These guys have got them anyway, so let's just go with that. So let me just quickly read you something from the Sky News about them. Yeah, so I'll read you this, guys. So the Azov Brigade, which has far-right and ultra-nationalist roots, is part of Ukraine's National Guard and evolved out of a battalion that fought during Russia's occupation of Crimea 10 years ago. But in response to the neo-Nazi ideology of the group's founders, the US has banned the regiment from using American weapons since 2014. So are they tacitly, you know, does this article tacitly imply that the US has been, you know, funding and arming these groups since 2014? I don't know, guys. I'll put the link in the description, but let me just read it to you again. But in response to the neo-Nazis ideology of the group's founders, the US has banned the regiment from using American weapons since 2014. Guys, I don't know what that means. It's kind of cryptic to me. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it. What do you think? Does that mean that the US has been funding this war since 2014? I don't know. That's what it says there. So finally, guys, the G7. So the G7 are meeting in Italy, and they're going to focus on Russia, China, Ukraine, and Africa. Not many people talking about Africa at the moment. And guys, you know, the G7, you know, in the future, people start to talk about Antarctica because of the amount of resources and oil that's down there. At the moment, it's kind of a, well, it's kind of a cold subject. You know, but in the future, Antarctica is going to be the key that everybody's going to be fighting over. And whoever controls the Falklands controls Antarctica. That's why for Britain, the Falklands is such a key area. So, yeah, Russia, China, Ukraine, Africa. The amount of resources and, you know, the resources that's in Africa. Russia has got a huge, you know, Russia's really muscling in Africa. You know, there's Russian and French, how do I word it? Russian and French mining companies are competing over minerals in a lot of places in Africa. So, in fact, I'll actually be speaking to one of my friends later, and he's going to give me an update who's in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. That's not democratic and it's not a republic. But anyway, guys, so he's going to give me an update on what's happening there, guys. But what I want to focus on here is Africa and the raw materials and Russia's influence in Africa. Why is Russia having such a big influence in Africa? Because they know what's coming. They know that this conflict with NATO, it's going to be a long, protracted war, and it's going to be a war of resources. And I've said this so many times. And if you're going to have a war of resources, it doesn't matter how good your supply chain is. If you can produce, whatever you can produce, that's going to be used. And it's going to come down to who can get the raw materials. And the raw materials in Africa, they're what the Russians are going to need. So that's why they're pushing their, influence into Africa to get those raw materials, to have the capacity to fight a long, drawn-out, protracted war where it's just going to come down to a slugging match of rifles, artillery, and all these fancy weapons that we've spent so much money on. They'll have been used up, and it won't make any difference because some of the chips, the components, the manufacturing capacity is not there, and it's just going to come down to a war of, you know, who can produce the most and the fastest, and I think the fastest is going to win. But anyway, guys, don't forget as well, Ukraine is a huge gas producer. There's uranium, there's coal. It's a resource-rich country. You know, that's why, you know, people are fighting over it. And, you know, I know that, you know, there's rumours about Hunter Biden. He was out there. He was, you know, I don't know what the word's looking for. It was very strange that all of a sudden Hunter Biden he was on the board of directors on one of these huge oil companies. I don't know what gas companies, guys. I don't know what you think about that. And finally, we are here, guys. I've got one thing from Al Jazeera, which is here. Yeah. So in these in this G7, guys, with this you know, this meeting that they're all having, one of the things that they're going to be talking about is that let me just read it to you. An Italian source told Al Jazeera that the G7 and EU countries are hoping to announce an agreement over a 50 billion loan for Ukraine, which would be guaranteed by profits accrued on Russian frozen assets. So the key words there are loan. So they're not giving this money to Ukraine, they're loaning it to Ukraine. So that means that there's an invested interest in Ukraine being able to pay that loan back, which is really interesting. Now, this is going to be guaranteed by profits from Russian assets. Now, I don't know how they're going to do this, but to me, that sounds like they're going to be taking the Russian assets in Europe. I'm just going to say it's property. I'm going to say it's stocks. Think financial products. I think, but the profit that they're making from that's being frozen, that will just be going into a bank and the Russians can't touch it. I think they're going to give this money in a loan to Ukraine. There's a lot of questions I've got on here, but when you start messing with people's money, that's when the gloves go off. So at the moment, you've probably got, some oligarchs, and they're probably like, Vladimir, wait for main invasion. I have lots of property in Belgium stock market. And the reality is they're not going to want, they're going to be putting pressure on Vladimir Putin to wait because they've still got money frozen. But as soon as that money's taken away for them, there's no reason for them to, you know, stop or resist anything. They will just literally go, right, okay, you've taken our money, right, we're going to go full military on you. Guys, that is what I think, and that's what's been happening today. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to mag to grid.